I think we all assumed after The Flash bombed at the box office, and it is basically on its way to becoming the biggest box office flop in the history of movies until Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny decides to stop being in theaters, and then that one will overtake it. But one of the biggest flops ever. We didn't believe things could actually get worse for James Gunn, his DCU that he's setting up, and obviously David Zaslav, Warner Brothers Discovery, and all these DC comic character movies that have been flopping left and right. And it turns out, oh, we were wrong. It actually can get worse. It can get much worse. It can get so bad you couldn't possibly imagine that a movie opening featuring a DC Comics character could perform this poorly. I am talking about Blue Beetle. It's coming out towards the end of August. We're less than a month away, and it looks like it's gonna be absolutely terrible. I do want to give a tip of the cap to the guys over at Bounding Into Comics. They have the article where I got a lot of the information from. They sourced it very well, and obviously I'll be talking about that here in the video as well. Early box office projections are here for the upcoming Blue Beetle film starring Xolo Maridueña, and they look to be utter nightmare fuel for Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav, James Gunn, Peter Safran, and their DC universe. Box Office Pro predicts the film will only bring in between $12 and $17 million in its opening domestic weekend. The outlet further notes the film will only gross between $27 million and $55 million in its entire theatrical run. Obviously, it's talking about the domestic gross. We'll see what happens overseas, and we certainly have seen movies struggle at the domestic box office, actually do gangbusters and really blow up overseas. The Fast and Furious franchise is one of those. The Aquaman movie is certainly another one that comes to mind, but water-based movies tend to do very, very well in the Chinese market, but Blue Beetle is not a water-based superhero, and he certainly doesn't have the notoriety of an Aquaman-type character, or Wonder Woman, or Superman, or really even Black Adam or Shazam for that matter. It looks like things are going from bad to worse as they ramp up for Superman Legacy and the true dawning of the DCU. And some of you may say, Wes, this has nothing to do with James Gunn of the DCU. This is still part of the DCEU. And I say, I will clear that up for you here in a few minutes after we talk about this absolute nightmare that's happening at this very moment for David Zaslav and Warner Brothers Discovery happening with this Blue Beetle movie, because it is actually very important to James Gunn and the future of the DCU, because I believe he's made a serious miscalculation when it comes to the character of Jaime Reyes, Blue Beetle, and Xolo Maridueña in the starring role of this movie. To put this all in context, The Flash had an opening weekend of $55 million domestically. It has gone on to gross $107 million, with its time in theaters quickly coming to an end. Shazam! Fury of the Gods had a domestic opening of $30.1 million. The film ended its domestic run at $57.6 million. Black Adam, now a seemingly bright spot, despite still being a financial failure, had a domestic opening weekend of $67 million and went on to gross $168.1 million. Yes, you put that together correctly. It looks like Blue Beetle, on the high end, will gross half of what Shazam! Fury of the Gods did on its opening weekend. That is a very, very low bar. In fact, I believe Shazam! Fury of the Gods, up until Blue Beetle comes out, had been the worst performing, just overall DC-based movie since the DCEU started. And this is going to set the bar even lower somehow. I don't know why they even made this Blue Beetle movie. No, I do know why. Actually, let's walk that one back. Walter Amada and the people at Warner Brothers at the time needed new, fresh content for HBO Max as they were getting ready to roll it out. And they wanted original DC content. Think Batgirls. When they saw the script and what they were planning to do for Blue Beetle, they thought, man, this is so good. We should pump more money into it and put it into theaters. It's such a good script. We should not waste this on our streaming platform. We need to make it actually for theaters, and maybe we can make a few extra bucks for it. The problem is, of course, it's Blue Beetle for one, and it's not even Ted Kord. It's Jaime Reyes, the more obscure version of Blue Beetle. And yes, I understand that they wanted a Latino superhero in the DC Comics universe, but there were other options that they could have went towards that actually would have had some name cachet and a little bit of actual fandom attached to them, which unfortunately, and I'm not saying Blue Beetle's a bad character. I kind of like Blue Beetle. I like the Ted Kord version better. You know, Jaime Reyes is okay. He's pretty bland. He doesn't really stand out. There's not really a fandom attached to that character. Most people, when you say Blue Beetle, they're not even going to know that you're talking about the same universe that Batman and Superman, Wonder Woman, and the Justice League live in. Now, I understand that the MCU and Kevin Feige have had some really big successes with this type of formula, i.e. Guardians of the Galaxy, a more obscure team that not a lot of people have heard of, But the MCU was so hot at that time, and they delivered so many great movies in a row, that you could kind of take a risk like that with a team like Guardians of the Galaxy, and there was a decent chance that it was going to be successful, and obviously it turned out to be very successful. Not only were the Guardians of the Galaxy's key players in a lot of the Avengers movies after that, but they actually had their own trilogy and probably made Disney and Marvel Studios a ton of money. The DCEU never ever had any momentum, ever. Yes, they had a couple of high moments here and there, but for the most part, even when things went well, like they were going bad. You remember when the Suicide Squad opened, they were like, oh my goodness, this is so much bigger than we actually imagined that the Suicide Squad would do. We didn't think there would be this much interest in this team of ragtag anti-heroes, on the big screen. And what happened after that? It turned out the movie sucked and people didn't go for the next weekend. It ended up making far less than it probably should have based on the opening weekend itself. And the same thing pretty much happened with Batman versus Superman. The same thing kind of happened to Justice League. And then you had the big standouts, Wonder Woman and obviously Aquaman. The Wonder Woman sequel probably didn't live up to that original movie. We shall see what happens with Aquaman, The Lost Kingdom. Obviously, that's the last big hope for the DCEU before it basically just lies dormant and dies, and the DCU kind of comes up into its place. But they never really had the momentum to try a character like Blue Beetle in a solo movie, but they never really had the momentum or any type of success that would have indicated that the Blue Beetle would ever succeed, especially being attached to the DCEU. It was an enormous risk. And obviously looking at it right now, less than a month away from the movie actually coming out, it looks like an enormous error on their part, and they probably should have scrapped it like the Batgirl movie. The Wrap reports the film has an estimated budget of $120 million. In order for the film to break even, it would need to make at least $300 million globally. With a $55 million domestic run, that means it needs to bring in at least $245 million internationally. The Flash only took in $160.4 million internationally. Shazam! Fury of the Gods capped out at $74.5 million internationally. And Black Adam only did $223.1 million internationally. So there you've got The Flash, who's certainly a much more known commodity as far as superheroes go, with all the cameos in the world from Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck and I guess every other person they can scrounge up. I think even George Clooney is in that one as Batman. And it didn't do the necessary numbers for this movie to break even with what we expect the domestic haul to be. Black Adam had Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in the starring role of the movie. The biggest action movie star in the world at the moment, I guess outside of Tom Cruise. I believe Tom Cruise has probably passed him up now. And The Rock couldn't even bring in a big enough international audience to subsidize the domestic numbers we're expecting for Blue Beetle to make them actually break even. And obviously we know Shazam! Fury of the Gods just, it just didn't work out for that movie. I watched it. It wasn't as good as the first one, but, this thing isn't going to snip those numbers. And it's going to be another enormous financial windfall for David Zaslav, Warner Brothers Discovery, and everybody associated with the DCEU. They're just losing money hand over fist. It's hard to blame this, obviously, on David Zaslav, Warner Brothers Discovery. This stuff was already in the pipeline. Now, he could have scrapped it like he did the Batgirl movie, but obviously they had enough faith in the movie moving forward, as I guess the quality was good enough that they decided it warranted actually being released. But obviously that's looking like a bit of a mistake. I don't know what they were thinking. Now, some of you are going, but Wes, you said this has something to do with James Gunn. And that is very true, because James Gunn, not only did he put his name behind the Flash movie being the greatest superhero movie of all times, that didn't help. He's actually put his name behind Xolo Maridueña as the star of Blue Beetle in the future of the DCU. James Gunn recently sat down with the Inside of You podcast to discuss taking over as co-chair and CEO of DC Studios and writing, directing the upcoming superhero film Superman Legacy. It was during an exchange with host Michael Rosenbaum about the difference between the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DCU that Gunn revealed Blue Beetle as the first DCU character audiences will meet. He said, the first DCU character for sure is Blue Beetle, and the first full DCU movie is Superman Legacy. So Blue Beetle is the first taste of what the DCU is going to be, and the first hero that we're going to meet that we know is also going to be in James Gunn's DCU. Now, I understand he probably saw the movie, he has faith in the actor and the character, and maybe he really likes the story. But I don't know why he decided that Blue Beetle Jaime Reyes needed to be the character that was plucked out of the DCU and placed into the DCEU. Like, he didn't have room for Henry Cavill as Superman. Apparently, he does not have room for Jason Momoa as Aquaman. He's got no room for Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but he's got room for Zolo Maridueña, the kid from Cobra Kai, as Blue Beetle. And obviously, Amanda Waller and John Cena as Peacemaker, and some of the things that he had cast before when he was doing the Suicide Squad and the Peacemaker, a TV show for HBO Max. The Cobra Kai kid seems nice. I got nothing against him. And I hope this Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle movie is good, but obviously nobody's looking forward to it. Nobody cares about the character. This isn't something that really gives people an optimistic outlook for the DCU moving forward and what James Gunn is going to do. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, you got to give James Gunn a chance. He needs more time. This is the problem. And I don't think it's getting through your thick heads. He probably doesn't have more time. If anything, he has less time now, because every single movie that they've released since he took over as the co-CEO of DC Studios has bombed, has cost Warner Brothers Discovery not just a couple of $1 million, but a lot of them hundreds of millions of dollars. Shazam is bombed. Black Adam is bombed. We've had the Flash movie that obviously mega bombed, and now we have another bomb coming in on the way with the Blue Beetle movie. And you have Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom, which, fingers crossed for James Gunn and everybody at DC Studios, will buy them some time to where they can actually get to Superman Legacy. But there's a good chance it's already too late for that. I talk about it in a video, and a lot of people just don't understand me when I'm speaking, and I'm explaining to them why there's a good chance James Gunn's DCU was already dead, not because anything James Gunn did, because of all the shit surrounding the DCEU as it dies a very violent, very pathetic death that we're seeing right now. There's also a link in the video description.